Hello and welcome to another SkaredCast video. Today I'm going to be going over the process that I use to make a 2000 point Dark Eldar army. Let's dive in.
The Dark Kid.
Hello and welcome to another SkaredCast video. I'm Skari, your grateful host, and this video is going to discuss how I build a new 2000 point list, or at least some of the thought processes that I use when building a competitive ITC list. Lately, I have been thinking hard and long about all the changes, chapter approved, psychic awakening, all the things that have sort of affected the way that the game is played right now. And to be honest, I've been very overwhelmed. So when I'm thinking of army lists that I want to try and play, it's very hard for me to sort of picture them on the table. So I'm going to go over sort of like a basic process. It's not going to be a very long video, but hopefully some of the strategies I use here sort of help you build your list, whether it's a drukhari list or a space marine list or a necron list or a tau list or whatever it is you want. But let's sort of dive right into that. In order to visualize what I want in my army, I tend to grab the entire collection, whether I'm making a list for my Black Templars, my Talaran. I spend a little bit of time putting out all the models, seeing what I've painted so far and collected. As you can see here, this is essentially the drukhari collection. It's all in different stages. I've of course decided on a new color scheme for the whole army, which is this one. So all the older color scheme stuff is there, and as I repaint it, it'll sort of end up all looking more like that. But it gives me a sense of what I have to work with. So this is the visualization stage, and I like to think about other army lists that I've made that I really enjoyed playing. Whether it's a list with all 60 of my witches, or a list with the Tantalus in it, or a list with all the raiders and all the venoms and like a crazy dedicated transport spam army. And sort of remember what elements I had in there that I really enjoyed playing with. The aim here is to make a 2000 point ITC army list. And my goal is to make an army list that plays off of point denial. So what does that mean? It's an ITC list that doesn't allow my opponent to maximize on their secondary points. And the key to this is doing a list that can still put punch out, that can still do damage, that you can still play effectively while mitigating the amount of points that they can get off of you throughout the course of the game. So with that in mind, taking into mind, of course, the changes for chapter approved and all that good stuff, this is when I start really thinking about, well, how many detachments do I want? Who do I want to lead the army? What sort of stratagems do I want to use? How many command points do I want? What elements are key to the army itself? Now, in order to base that off, I have to take a step back, and after sort of visualizing what I have available to me, I also put in, off to the side, things that either need repairs or models that are primed and haven't been painted yet, because those are things that I can add in to the list. I don't just have 9 jet bikes. I really have, 13 jet bikes. If I want to make more jet bikes, I just have to paint those guys and then I'm ready to go. So I have to be willing to do some extra work to sort of build something that I want. And honestly, the next step is sort of a reference point. So I see what I have available, and then I have to reference to things that I've really enjoyed playing. The way I do that is I go to an army list that I have been playing previously, that I had success with, that I've really enjoyed playing. And essentially I'll use that as a template with the add-ins that I can add in or take out, substitute, in order to make a list from there. Here's the reference point. A 2000 point list that I took recently to the Beer and Pretzels Open, as well as a couple of other events, and did very well too. I took Best General at the Beer and Pretzels Open, and this list was designed after the Psychic Awakening Rise of the Phoenix book came out. It includes a couple of things that I thought were really, really cool and proved to be really, really cool. It's a 3-detachment army. You have a Cabal of the Black Heart Spearhead with an Archon with a Husk Blade and 3 triple disintegrated Ravagers. You have a battalion detachment of Witch Cult with Berserk Fugue and Test of Skill. That's where the 2 Void Ravens are. I found the +1 to wound vehicles on the Void Ravens excellent, as well as lots of Shard Nets and Impalers. Drazar and the Succubus. Drazar is a good counterattack unit. The Shard Nets to hold infantry in place. And then a custom Coven battalion that had 3 Talos in a single unit with Haywire, Chainfill, Macroscalpels, 2 Homunculuses with Hex Rifles, unit of 10 racks with an Ossifactor and a Venom Blade, 8 racks with an Ossifactor, Venom Blade, and then 5 racks. And this army was designed to essentially also pop into these 3 raiders that were part of the Coven. Why? They were Dark Technomancers, which means they get +1 to wound and +1 damage on their shooting guns, which helps the Haywire, helps the Disintegrators, helps the Hex Rifles, helps the Ossifactors. And they also had Dark Harvest. So when I would charge in with the racks especially, they would do mortal wounds on 5+. And this proved to be very fun, very entertaining. However, this list, even though very, very fun to play, can table a knight army, no problem, I found it gave up too many secondary points. Then they release the chapter-approved points themselves. Each Ravager has gone up 15 points. Each of the Shardnet and Impalers has gone up 3 points, so that's 3, 3, 3, 3, that's 12 points there. The Archon went down 15 points. Drazar went down 20 points. But everything else stayed the same. So it sort of tweaked the points in and of themselves, and that's kind of got me thinking, I really want to sort of play better to the ITC missions and still keep some of the elements that I've really been enjoying. Do I think the Ravagers are worth keeping? Absolutely. Do I think they're worth keeping in Cabal of Blackheart? Well, that's something that I've been brainstorming about. I feel that Flayed Skull might be better. Now, if I'm running Flayed Skull for them, then I might as well switch the Witches over to Cablite Warriors and then switch some of the Raiders into either Raiders or Venoms to keep them in. The Talos are great, but if you look at this list, each of them gives up a big game hunter point. Each of the tanks gives up a big game hunter point, and you can also mark for death 4 things, and you have 5 headhunter points. So in terms of secondary objectives, I'm giving up 3 secondary objectives quite easily, or I'm giving up at least 2 in mark for death and big game hunter. The aim for me to retool this list is to make it harder for my opponent to get points, while at the same time making it easier for me to have more tactical options when looking at points themselves. So leave a comment down below. Let me know what you would do at this stage. Would you sort of play with something that you've been fun and kind of tweak it minimally? Maybe take out a few guys to adjust for the point value? Or would you sort of do a quick reworking? Now, when I take to the reference point, I always want to say, okay, what do I want to keep? Definitely know I want to keep the 2 Void Raven Bombers. They have been fantastic in every game I've been playing them so far. The Ravagers are a staple. I love them. I love having my opponents forcing my opponents to play against them. So, 2 Void Raven Bombers, 3 Ravagers. Awesome. The Talos, they've been fun, but I don't think they're really needed in this list to have a decent amount of anti-tank. I do want to potentially keep the battalion, but I might have to take out the Shardnets and Impalers. And then at the same time, the Succubus, Drazar went down, Archon went down as well. And then I might actually tweak it, because these guys are 75 points. She's 58 points. So I might actually sub something out like this and kind of put in another Succubus there to fill in for Homunculus and then make the most of the point difference as well. Do I want to keep the custom Coven? I'm not sure. There's a couple of things I've been thinking about. So this brings me to the third part. So the first was visualization, the second was reference, and the third was brainstorming. I have lots of ideas that go through my head. I have decent amount of models to pick from. Sadly, there are some things that in order to make a good list, you have to make sacrifices. So Beast Packs sacrificed, all of them, Razor Wings, they're sacrificed. Hellions, even though they got a cool point decrease, they don't really fit into this style army that I'm playing, so they've been sacrificed. The Scourge have been great, so I might actually put them in. Venoms have been good, I might actually put them back in. The Talos, the Chronos are great, but they give up so many points in ITC, and I have been looking at my Grotesques again, because they're quite versatile in pretty much every single style of game. I also really enjoy playing my Mandrakes. They give a lot of technical capabilities in-game, and the Incubi, I've been trying them out, hit like a freight train. The Reaver jet bikes, also very appealing to use, and of course I have a plethora of Cowblight warriors to use. The Reaper, the only reason I'm not really considering the Reaper is because he's very hard to transport, and if I travel all the way down to Vegas or big events, I have to be able to transport the models. I don't have the foam for one of those guys, so I want to keep it to stuff that I have the foam for as well, which is these guys, Venoms and Raiders as well. So that's another thing. You know, what do I want to travel with, and that's going to sort of influence my decision as well. So I do know for a fact that I'm probably going to drop the Talos. They just give up too many points, so I'm going to put them off to the side as well, like this. Now, something that I've been looking at is adding in a couple of grotesque units. I want to make them 3-man. There's 2 reasons I want to do this. Number 1, I want to make sure that I can take engineers if I want. And grotesques make for great engineers in a world where Thunderfire cannons exist. Also, 3 grotesques are 6 power level, which means that no longer do they count for power level. And if you're looking for gangbusters, there's a full 4 gangbuster points. However, it's in 2 different units, and if my opponent does take gangbusters, I can always hide them, and they're not a lot of points. You know, they can be used later in the game as a counter-attack unit, which is really cool. So I like them. They're tough engineers. If the opponent wants to kill them, that's fine, but I can hide them. They're 105 points each, which is not bad. Now, this brings me to the next sort of choice I want to make. I sort of want to get rid of the battalion of Coven. I was thinking about this. Even though it's really fun and dandy, I want to make this a Prophets of Flesh battalion detachment with a Homunculus to give an additional D3 command points. So I basically use the Alliance of Agony for the extra command points. And I want to make sure that I can add in 1 or 2 units of my Mandrakes. I find when I played my Venom spam list especially, the Mandrakes themselves were some of the best units that I had access to. So at least 2 units of 5, potentially even a 3rd one, in now a Spearhead detachment. So I think that's one of the first changes I want to make. It gives me versatility for mission, it gives me toughness and versatility in secondary objectives, and it lowers my HQ count as well, which is something that I want to do while keeping some of the command points as well. Another thing that I was thinking about is to lower the big game hunter / marked for death. So that can be marked for death, that can be marked for death, that can be marked for death. These 2 can be marked for death as well. And then these are big game hunters. So they could potentially mark 4 of these for death and then get 4 big game hunter points. So in order to stop that from happening, I'm essentially, the first thing I'm going to be doing is taking 1 of these raiders out of the list, which means you could still mark for death for them, but then you would only get 3 big game hunter points, or you get 4 big game hunter points and only mark for death 3 of the Ravagers, for example. That makes it a lot harder for my opponent to sort of maximize on those. I've also added in a Archon here. This is more of a maybe sort of thing, and I'm not sure what sort of detachment to put them in or what rules I'm going to be using for them. Essentially I know what they're going to do, and I know what Drazar and the Succubus is going to do, and I know what they're going to do. However, I'm not sure about the Shard Nets and Impalers right now. So at this point, I'm starting to brainstorm, and I'm looking, okay, so that looks good, I like this. Now, something that I like is that if I wanted to, I could potentially put them aggressively in the Raiders, and then put close combat characters in the Raiders, right? So I could potentially put the characters in the Raiders with the Grotesques to make sort of like a forward push, sort of aggressive style army, which is great. So I really like that style. I could deploy them out here. and put them and take engineers against something that I want to hide from or whatnot, which is also good. And then potentially put, say, the witches inside of them as well. So you have that sort of thing. So you can put 2 units in one, 2 units in the other, or maybe do 1 and 1. So I might want to do that more often than not, and then potentially make that, say, like a 15-man unit, because it's only 6 power level for 15 witches, which means I could deep strike 1 unit with a webway portal to keep them guessing with a webway strike, and then 2 mandrake units that can deep strike as well, which I really like too. Now, another thing I'm considering is making these flayed skull and not Cabal of Black Heart, simply to ignore cover. If that's the case, then I would potentially look at putting in a basic battalion, so 3 units of Cavalite Warriors, bringing my command points up, and then potentially adding some of the Venoms into the list as well, giving me added mobility. However, in order to do that, I want to make sure that it's harder for my opponent to get Butcher's Bill, so killing 2 things at a time, which means instead of going for something like 6 Venoms and a bunch of guys, I might only put 3 Venoms in with guys inside, so that it's a little harder for them to pick and choose what units to kill, or maybe just 2 Venoms, then have 1 bigger unit of Cavalite Warriors that I could then put in the Raiders. So there's all stuff, part of the brain phase that I'm using to essentially come up with a cool idea. So I counted out the points. This is part of the brainstorming phase. You want to really sort of visualize how many points you have left. So look at this, that's 1,700 points. Doesn't look like a lot, but I was thinking, okay, so if I want to add in some of these Venoms, I might as well do that then. And we could add, say, 3 Venoms, just straight stock 65-point Venoms to that detachment, meaning that we could use them essentially to put the witches inside of the Venoms if they want to go in there for detachment-wise and whatnot. And that leaves me about 100 points or so. So I was thinking, well, why not capitalize on the fact that I'm taking a Prophets of Flesh detachment, which allows me to then go, okay, well, if I do 1 unit of 10 racks with a couple of ossifactors in there, it would potentially, or maybe 1 ossifactor, I'll have to check the points, but what it would allow me to do, it was allow me to then have access to the Black Cornucopians stratagem as well. So in the middle of the game, if I really wanted to, racks themselves can be pretty hardy to try and kill. So if I have that unit in there, it would allow me to then be more versatile in the game itself and give me some more troops for board control, backfield presence, that sort of thing as well. It also gives me another option to either deep strike on the board or put in one of the raiders and send with some of my key units at the front there. So once I've looked at that, then I do the points and see if I need to do any final tweakings, and that brings me to the last stage. And I've done the points, and it's 2,000 points on the nose. I always love it when an army comes to fruition. It's very similar to what I had lots of fun with. So in terms of the game itself, it'll be very interesting. It'll be like a conglomeration of different things to run. Essentially, at 101 points left, and I was able to put a Huskblade on my Archon and a full unit of racks with 1 ossifactor. So I have a full unit of racks with an ossifactor, and I changed his Venom Blade to a Huskblade. And so now the fun stuff happens where you get to pick your obsessions and whatnot. Definitely want to try to do a test of skill. I'll be doing tests of skill on the Void Raven Bombers and the 2 Razorwing the 2 Raiders, so they get +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles, essentially. And then I've got that, which I'm not sure whether to keep as Cabal of the Flayed Skull or as Cabal of the Black Heart. So maybe you can leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. What do you think I should do with it? I'm leaning towards Flayed Skull, but this means I can do Alliance of Agony, give him a Warlord trait for an extra D3 command points, give my Succubus an additional Warlord trait as well, have Drazar for some counter-attack support, have the ability to pick things like Recon, because I have lots of speed, Mark for Death, because I can kill things, Big Game Hunter, because I can kill tanks, as well as Engineers, who have good units that can do that, or Behind Enemy Lines, because options to get behind enemy lines as well. But that is a quick little session on how me, Skari, makes an army list based off of an old army list. I hope you found this useful. This is just one of the many processes that I use to sort of come up with a cool list. I have an RTT that I'm going to this Sunday, so I will be testing out this list at that little RTT. And then I have a GT, the Hooded Goblin GT, in 2 weeks. And it seems like I've just created a list that I'll be taking to that GT. So, thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Leave a comment down below, leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And a huge shout out to all the denizens, the Patreons to the channel. Thanks to you, I get to do cool stuff like this. If you'd like to join the denizen ranks, check the links in the description below. But I'm Skari, your grateful host, signing off until next time. Skari out.